It really is fantastic to be nominated alongside such a fantastic selection of exciting and interesting books, many of which I've read, all of which I intend to read, and I hope you will join me in that. You've done a great many things differently here at the University of Warwick. It's especially rare these days to have a major literary award without corporate sponsorship. So I, in particular, want to thank you for going no logo on this. Now, and actually, I think it's more than politically a good idea. I think you should see this as somewhat prescient, because imagine if the prize committee had decided that they were going to launch the inaugural HBOS Warwick Prize for Writing. You would have been nationalized by now. And maybe that's not so bad for a public university. These things, they tend to come full circle, as we're seeing now. A few personal thank yous, because this is a special day for me. My husband, Avi Lewis, is here. What you call complexity in our home just looked like chaos. It meant every single surface was covered in papers and Post-it notes and cue cards and books and articles. And Avi lived in that chaos with tremendous cheer and grace, and he was my partner in this process in every conceivable way, including being my first reader. And I realize that there's been a lively discussion here in Britain. I've heard a little something about it over the Atlantic, about why there aren't more women intellectuals out there. Now, there are many women intellectuals out there, as you know. But I do have a theory about why there aren't more public intellectuals who are women, and it's not a scientific theory, so the scientists in the crowd, please forgive me. I think it's because there aren't more Avis, personally. Not enough feminist husbands. My agent, Carolina Sutton, is also here. Thank you, Carolina, for being here. You could not ask for a more right-on advocate in the wilds of publishing. Thank you, Carolina, and I know you'll join me in taking this moment to remember our beloved and much missed colleague, Kate Jones, who died last year. I was extremely fortunate to work with a group of editors who embraced complexity in this project, even when it conflicted with market pressures, and that was very, very important in terms of allowing me to write a book that took much longer than it was supposed to take, and that changed and was changed by the research process. And rather than insisting that I adhere to strict deadlines, which is the way the publishing industry usually works, that you deliver even if your thesis is taking you into other areas, they gave me the time and the space to miss my deadline by 2 years. And that is very, very rare. Helen Conford from Penguin was one of those wonderful editors. She's here tonight. She is the kind of editor that the publishing industry needs more of. And she supported the Shock Doctrine with great creativity and enthusiasm from the earliest days. Two editors who are not here also pored over the manuscript and improved it in immeasurable ways. This really was a team project in so many ways. And those editors are Frances Cody from Picador, USA, and Louise Dennis from Knopf, Canada. Another member of our little team who I have to mention, who I want to mention, is my research assistant, Deborah Levy, who's a children's librarian. And she's been working with me for 8 years. And a book like this is really only as strong as its research. And I would be absolutely lost without Debbie. All of us extend our thanks to you for this incredible gesture at a very difficult time in publishing. Most of the news you hear about publishing is about layoffs and imprints closing. So to hear news of a new literary prize and new support for the writing life is very meaningful in this particular moment. So thank you for that from all of us. You have very good timing. So this prize, as you've heard, the theme of this prize is complexity. So I thought I might say a couple of words on that theme. There is simplicity on the other side of complexity, as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, and it's such a wonderful quote that is the theme of this award. And that's, I think, what so many of us are striving for that place on the other end of the creative process where the breathing is a little bit easier. and that suddenly there's a sense of calm and clarity. That kind of complexity is actually inclusive and it's empowering. It brings more people into the learning process. And that's, I think, what we should strive for and what we should try to celebrate and always do better at. But there is another kind of complexity that I think is worth talking about this evening, one that seems designed not to illuminate, but to obscure, not to include, but to exclude. Let's call it false complexity, for lack of a better phrase. It acts as a kind of a shield, keeping crucial information, crucial to our democracy, locked in a kind of an experts-only club. This is one of the themes of the Shock Doctrine. And it strikes me as interesting in retrospect, given the moment in which we find ourselves, that my book, and most of you don't know this, came out on the same day as Alan Greenspan's book. We even had the same publisher. And we received very different receptions, I don't mind telling you. Back in 2007, Mr. Greenspan was still the maestro, as they called him, the magician of Wall Street, or the oracle, just a few of his little nicknames. And all of this magical powers, they were projected onto him because he seemed that he must have such powers because nobody could understand a word he was saying. It was so complex. Now, as it happens, it was precisely that aura of incomprehensibility that gave rise to such complex financial instruments as collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, structured investment vehicles, mortgage-backed securities, and so on. All of them based on complex mathematical models that made perfect sense in the basement of the University of Chicago economics departments, but didn't pan out quite so well in the real world. Now, throughout the 90s, Mr. Greenspan and many others argued that the multi-trillion-dollar derivatives market couldn't be regulated by governments because it was simply too complex for mere mortals to understand, right? Meanwhile, those of us who saw deregulated capitalism as a disaster, way back when it was still a miracle, were constantly derided for our lack of complexity. We were invariably characterized as facile, simplistic, naive. It's more complicated than that, we were told again and again on countless op-ed pages. Leave the economics to the experts. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is sometimes complexity is not the route to clarity. It's just a cover for a scam. So speaking of the shield of false complexity, it strikes me that a few of my right-wing critics, and I should warn you that I do have a few right-wing critics, so get ready, may take delight in the fact that the panel of judges here is chaired by a writer of self-described weird fiction. They will proclaim with great relish her arguments are not based on fact, but on fiction. She's not a writer of reality, but of fantasy, which is what they've been saying all along. So it's my turn to say it's more complicated than that. After all, it seems our entire global financial system was based on weird fiction, if you'll allow me to borrow the phrase, China. And the best of the financial press corps missed it, while the sci-fi writers and eco-activists called it decades ago. It was the journalists and economists, not us so-called flakes, who for so long believed in magic. So here we are, with all the boundaries dissolving, celebrating complexity at a time when things have suddenly become rather simple, and feting books when we're not quite sure of their survival. So thank you once again for all of that, and best of luck with this wonderful endeavor.